Hello, welcome or welcome back, depending on if you're new here. Now that the new year is here, it's time to reset my watercolor palette. So that's what we're doing today. I have been using this 18 Well Magello palette for a while. I really like it. It's simple, it does the job, it's not expensive. I do stick down some extra pans along the inner edge with just some double-sided tape, and that lets me have a couple of extra pans for paints that I don't use often enough to warrant them having their own well, but I like having them here for convenience anyway, or sometimes I use them as a way to test out certain colors to see if maybe I will end up using them enough to switch them into the main well. I'll link the palette itself below in case you're interested. I don't usually clean my palette throughout the year. I like to mix with whatever is already there, so this is one of the very few times that it will get a full cleaning. I'll wipe it down, I'll take a look at what paints are in here, and normally towards the end of the year I will stop refilling the wells that I finish so that I can really see which ones I've been using a lot of, and also so that in the case like what happened last year, if I end up needing to shift around a significant portion of my paints, it's just easier because some of them are already empty. So I didn't have to do that this year. I'm actually pretty happy with my choices that I've been using over the last 12 months. I'll link my 2024 palette below. There isn't anything that I had added that I would say, oh, that was a terrible choice. So for the most part, I'm keeping similar paints, but I am swapping out a couple of colors where I've actually finished the tube and I have replacements that are similar but not the same, and I want to see how I feel about them before I decide if I should use these tubes instead or re-buy what I had before. So yeah, let's get into it. I am going to give the same disclaimer that I gave last year, which is in terms of my paint decisions. I paint a lot of landscapes and I love a convenience color, so if you're looking for a serious mixing palette, then my color choices are probably not going to be for you. But if you like to paint a lot of landscapes and you enjoy a convenience color, then you might find some options that will work for you as well. I like to make my little watercolor chart of the palette choices that I make, so it's easy to make sure I know which ones are which and see what they look like when they're dry. So I'm going to be filling in every other well so that I don't have to wait for the one next to it to dry before I keep going. So I'll do every other and then swing back around. Starting all the way on the left, we have Daniel Smith Hansa Yellow Medium. This is PY97, and not one of my most used colors, but it's important to have here for certain mixes, so this is definitely staying. Next we have Quinacridone Rose, which is also Daniel Smith. A lot of my paints are Daniel Smith, but not all of them. I will write down all of the names below in case you're interested, because some of them are annoying to spell. Quinacridone Rose is PV19. This one I like to use for florals. It's a really bright and pretty pink. Next we have Quinacridone Gold, which is PO48 and PY150. This is also Daniel Smith. And this one I added to my palette last year, and it's been in and out of my palette a lot, but I am glad that I put it back because it is a lovely gold color that does come in handy. So this will be staying for the next year. Next is Burnt Sienna, also Daniel Smith. This one is PBR7. I use this one in a lot of landscapes. It's a really nice, more reddish brown. Next is Daniel Smith Van Dyke Brown, PBR7. This one is absolutely such a convenience color that if you're running out of space on your palette and you're trying to decide what needs to go in it, this is definitely not one of them, because it's super easy to mix a nice dark brown on your own, but Like I said before, I paint a lot of landscapes, and it's worth it for me to just have this pre-mixed. I like having this in my palette, even if it's like really not necessarily a must-have. Next is Daniel Smith's Sap Green, P048, PY150, and PG7. This one is a must-have for me. It's such a bright green and it's so versatile, and again, I use this in a lot of landscapes, as I'm sure you can imagine. It's a very sunny color, really lovely. Next is M. Cerulean, and I love this color. I used to have Daniel Smith Cerulean and I was not a fan. I don't know if it was just my tube of it, but the Daniel Smith one did not seem very pigmented to me. It did not re-wet very easily. It didn't really mix that well. It had binder separation issues. It just like was not fun to paint with. And this M. version, which is PB36, is beautiful. It is so pigmented. It re-wets so easily. I have never had an issue with separation. It's gorgeous. It's just so nice, and I love it so much. And if you are looking for a nice cerulean, M. is totally 100% what I would recommend. Next is Daniel Smith's Indigo, PB60 and PBK6. And I debated whether or not to keep this one on here, same as last year actually, because I have Payne's Gray and Neutral Tint on here too, and I don't know that I need all three, but I'm not ready to let go of one of them yet, and I don't have anything that I want to put here instead. So for now, I'm keeping all three, and I'm going to give it another year in terms of deciding which two of the three that I want to keep. Next is Neutral Tint, also Daniel Smith. It is PBK6. It is a nice neutral dark gray that can absolutely be used as a black. Between the three that I just discussed, I would definitely keep Neutral Tint no matter what, because it's a more neutral color that's not a flat black. Next, we move up to the top row here, starting with Indian Red, Daniel Smith, which is PR101. This one is a lovely reddish brown. It's really opaque, but the granulation in it is beautiful. And I don't use it often enough to really have had needed to refill it since I put it in here. But the few times where I'm like, oh, this is the perfect color, it really is the perfect color. So it's staying. Next is Pyrrol Orange, which I definitely misspelled when I wrote on my little swatch sheet, so please ignore that. This is also Daniel Smith. It's PO73. I don't really reach for an orange very often, ever, unless like the thing that I'm painting is orange. So it definitely doesn't warrant its own place on the palette, which is why it's here as a little pan on the side. It is a really bright and pretty orange though. Next is Cobalt Teal Blue, which is also Daniel Smith, PG50. I moved this one here last year because it's a really pretty color and I found that I was forgetting about it. Sometimes I feel like it has a weird consistency when you re-wet it, but it is very lovely. It also granulates really nicely, so I am going to leave this here. Next is a new addition to the palette. This is Schmincke Galaxy Pink. It is PV16 and PBR33, and this one is a tester. I'm interested in trying this in some mixes in the coming year and seeing how I like them. And if I use it often enough, I might put it on the actual pan where Amethyst Genuine is now, which we'll get to. It's a super granulation color, so of course the granulation is gorgeous, and I'm really excited to have it within easy reach so that hopefully I use it more. Now we go back to the beginning. We have our second color here. It is Buff Titanium from Daniel Smith, PW6:1. It's fairly opaque because it has that white pigment in it. It is super useful for toning down a color without using a straight white, and it's also really great for sand. I actually just finished my tube of it while refilling this pan, so clearly I do actually use this super often. Next is Daniel Smith's Pyrrol Red, which is PR254. This is a super bright and lovely red, great for mixing. That's all I really need to say for that one. Next is Daniel Smith's Yellow Ochre. It's PY43. I reach for this color all the time, especially in a landscape. I use it in mixes, I use it on its own. I just love this color, and it's definitely one of my most used. It's a great earthy brownish yellow, tan-ish color. Next is Vinci's Burnt Umber. I switched to this one after I finished my Daniel Smith tube last year, so I've been using this one for a year now, and I really like it. This one is PBR7. I've used a few Vinci paints now, and I've enjoyed using all of them, so this Burnt Umber is great. I like the consistency, I like the color, and I think I probably would keep using the Vinci one in the future. Next is Greenish Umber, or Terre, Verte, Brulee from Sennelier. This is a totally new addition to my palette. It's PB60, PBK7, and PY83, and it is replacing Pyrrol Green from Daniel Smith. Now, the reason I'm switching this one out is mostly because I finished my Pyrrol Green, and I bought this color a while ago without realizing that when I swatched it out, it looks very similar. So I want to try it and see if I can kind of use it in the same or similar way. I am a little bit skeptical about it because the Pyrrol Green from Daniel Smith is a 1 pigment paint, whereas this one has 3. So, I think we'll see. I'm excited to try it and see how it mixes. I like having a darker green on the palette, so I do definitely want one here, whether that's Pyrrol Green, Greenish Umber, or something else. So that's here for now, and we will see. Next is Olive Green. This one is Daniel Smith. It is PY97, PB29, and PBR7. This one is another convenience green that if you're running out of space on your palette, it's definitely not like the most necessary. But if you do paint a lot of landscapes, I've found that I need a color like this very often, and like the Van Dyke Brown, it is just really convenient to have a pre-mixed one already on the palette. So this one I use a lot of and think that I probably will continue to use a lot of. Next is another change to the palette. This is Daniel Smith's French Ultramarine. It is PB29. It is replacing Daniel Smith's regular ultramarine because I finished my tube of it, and I have a replacement, but I want to try this French ultramarine instead and see if I find myself having a preference. So that'll be another experiment for the year. After that is Payne's Gray, Daniel Smith. This one is PB29 and PBK9. I've actually just finished my tube of this when I was refilling this well. I do really like using this color. It's a nice, darker, grayish color, but like a very blue leaning gray, which I find comes in handy, especially for shadows. I do have, I think, at least one other Payne's Gray from another brand, so I might try a new one next and see what I think of it. But for now, I really like this Daniel Smith version. And this last well here is Daniel Smith Amethyst Genuine. And if you remember, I said earlier that I was thinking about removing this one, and I do love this color. I like that there is a sparkle to it. However, like a lot of the genuine Daniel Smith paints, they are pretty difficult to re-wet, and I don't find myself reaching for it that often. So I debated whether or not I wanted to remove it and put it on the side, the interior, and then put one of those in the well. And then I figured that that was just moving things around just to move things around, and really what I should do is just keep using them until I like either finish the Amethyst Genuine or until I'm using one of the interior edge colors enough where I really say to myself like, oh, this should really be in one of the main wells. So that's staying for now, but I don't know for how much longer. So now back to that inside edge. Here we have Roman Szmal's Potter's Pink. It's PR 233. I think this is a lovely Potter's Pink. I do have the Daniel Smith version. Similar to Cerulean, I found that it was super weird to work with. I didn't find it very pigmented. I had trouble re-wetting it. I had issues with binder separation. So this Roman Szmal version I find more pigmented. It also leans a little more pink, and the granulation is beautiful. So this is actually not available in a tube. It just comes in that pan. So I stuck that pan right in here. And now last but not least, we have Daniel Smith's Lavender, which is PW6, PV15, and PB29. This one is a nice blue leaning light purple. It's a little bit opaque because of that white pigment in it. I like it for landscapes when I'm doing little flowers, so it comes in handy. It's staying right where it was last year. And there we have it, my 2025 watercolor palette. Not a ton of drastic change, but I am excited to experiment with the new colors on here, and it should be pretty fun. I will link my color choices below and list them all out so you can see the spellings and the brands all together. If you've stuck with me this long, I really appreciate you. Please leave a like and consider subscribing if you want to see more from me. And if you are doing your own watercolor palette refresh, let me know in the comments what your go-to colors are. I feel like everyone's palettes are so personal and dependent on your own painting styles, and I love talking about it. So let me know what your absolute go-tos are. Let me know any colors that you absolutely hate. And yeah, I will see you in the next one.